Hi, today we're going to have a look at the instrument rack where you can layer multiple instruments on a single track.
Session grouping. Slots group in track 1-MIDI, scene 1 grouping. Track headers data grid.
Right, so I'm just going to go to the browser, Alt 5.
Browser grouping. Instruments list, 31 items data grid. Analog data item selected collapsed.
Right, we'll just install the analog.
Base data item selected collapsed.
And we're going to go back to the session view with Alt 1.
Session grouping. Track headers slots grouping. A, F, G.
There you go. Now we're going to go to the device, Alt 4.
Device detail grouping. Analog grouping.
Right, and here I'm going to press Ctrl G to create a device rack.
Group. Instrument rack grouping.
So it says instrument rack.
Device activator checkbox checked.
So now I'm just pressing the tab key.
Show/hide macro controls checkbox not checked. Show/hide macro variations checkbox not checked. Show/hide devices checkbox checked. Show/hide chain list checkbox not checked.
I'm just going to check that one.
Device activator checkbox checked.
And it's put us, when I check that, it put us back to the beginning, so just carry on tabbing.
Instrument rack grouping. Hot-swap presets button. Save preset button. Show/hide macro controls checkbox not checked. Show/hide macro variations checkbox not checked. Show/hide devices checkbox checked. Show/hide chain list checkbox checked. Auto select checkbox not checked.
I'll leave that one unticked because it will just confuse what's being shown and what's not.
Chain list data grid. Analog data item selected. Data item row 1 column 2. Chain pan slider C.
Right, now press tab twice there because the first time I pressed tab nothing spoke, and then second time it read that control.
Chain activator checkbox checked.
Okay.
Chain solo checkbox not checked. Hot-swap presets button.
Right, so I'm just going to shift tab back.
Chain solo checkbox not. Chain activator checkbox check. Chain pan slider C. Chain volume slider 0.0 decibels. Previous.
Right, now here I'm just going to right click using the
Cut
keyboard.
Ctrl +X. Copy Ctrl. Delete del. Duplicate Control, rename Control, edit info text, show names in mid, create chain.
Right, now I'm going to click on this create chain.
Device detail grouping, instrument rack grouping, chain list data grid, chain data item selected. Data item row 2, chain volume slider 0.0 decibels.
Right, now notice it said row 2, so this is a second instrument, although we haven't actually loaded one yet.
Chain pan slider C. Chain activator checkbox checked. Chain solo checkbox not checked.
I'm just pressing tab.
Hot-swap presets button.
I'm just going to click on the hot swap.
Browser grouping. Instruments list, collision data item selected. CV instrument. Base data item. Collision data item selected collapsed.
Let's click on collision. And go back to session view.
Session grouping. Slots grouping. In A, D, F. G, S.
Okay, now we go back to Alt view. Sorry, Alt 4, the device view.
Device detail grouping. In data item row 1. Chain volume slider 0.0 decibels. Chain pan slider C. Chain activator checkbox checked.
Right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pan these left and right. So
chain pan slider C. 1L, 17L, 27L, 28L, 37L. Chain pan slider 37L, 38L.
Right, 38 left, that will do.
Chain activator checkbox checked. Chain solo checkbox not checked. Hot-swap preset. Chain solo checkbox. Chain volumes, previous.
I'm going to press right arrow here.
Next. Chain pan slider 38L. Chain volume slider 0.0 decibels. Previous. Auto select checkbox not checked. Show/hide chain list checkbox checked. Show/hide devices checkbox checked. Show/hide macro variations checkbox not checked. Show/hide macro controls check. Save preset but hot-swap instrument rack grouping. Analog grouping.
Right, so that's, I'm just pressing right arrow there, so it says analog. Okay, now there it's not speaking.
Previous. Instrument rack grouping. Chain list data grid. Analog data item selected. Chain pan slider 38L. Chain volume slider 0.0 decibels. Previous.
I'm going to try object nav here with control shift arrow keys.
Chain pan slider chain volume slider no previous. Data item. No next. Analog data item column 1. Analog. No objects in no next. No previous. Analog data item. Data item column 2.
Right, let's activate that one.
Activate. Next. Chain pan slider 38L. Chain activator checkbox checked. Chain solo checkbox not checked. Hot-swap presets button. Chain previous. Auto select checkbox not checked. Show/hide chain list checkbox checked. Show/hide devices checkbox checked. Show/hide macro variations checked. Show/hide macro controls checked. Save preset button. Hot-swap instrument rack grouping. Hot-swap presets button. Instrument rack grouping. Device activator checkbox check. Previous. Next. Instrument rack grouping. Device activator checkbox checked. Previous. Analog grouping. Collision grouping.
Ah, there we go. Right, that took a little fiddling around. So let's see if I can backtrack.
Instrument rack grouping. Chain list data grid. Collision data item selected. Chain activator checkbox checked. Chain pan slider C. Chain volume slider 0.0 decibels. Chain pan slider C.
Right, so I'm going to move this one to the right.
Chain activator. Chain pan slider C. Chain activator check. Chain pan slider 20R. 20. 32R. 35R. Chain pan slider 35R. Chain pan slider 36R. Chain activate. Chain pan slider 37R. 38R.
There we go, 38, right. Okay.
Chain volume slider 0.0 previous.
Right, so I've gone to that previous. Now
Auto select checkbox not checked.
shift tab again.
Show/hide chain list checkbox checked. Show/hide devices checkbox. Show/hide macro variations check. Show/hide macro. Save preset button. Hot-swap preset. Instrument rack grouping.
Right, now I'm on instrument rack grouping, so now I'm just going to press the right arrow.
Collision grouping.
Now I'm going to press the up arrow.
Analog grouping.
And the down arrow.
Collision grouping.
There we go. So
Instrument rack grouping. Chain list data grid. Collision data item selected. Data item. Chain solo checkbox not checked.
right, okay, so it moves you to that solo. So
Chain activator checkbox checked.
shift tab.
Chain pan slider 38R. Chain volume slider 0. Previous. Auto select checkbox not checked. Show/hide chain list checkbox. Show/hide
Still
devices
shift tabbing.
checkbox check. Show/hide macro variations. Show/hide macro controls checkbox not checked. Save preset button. Hot-swap presets button. Instrument rack grouping.
Right, now once you're on that instrument rack grouping, that's where I'll press the up arrow
Collision grouping.
and then the right arrow. Sorry, I'll press the right arrow and then it takes you onto the list. Now press the up and down arrow to select.
Analog grouping. Collision grouping.
There you go. So let's go back to session.
Session grouping. Slot D, F, 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 S, K, J, A, F, J, K.
Okay, let's see if we can add a third instrument. So Alt F4.
Device detail grouping. Collision grouping.
Press the right mouse.
Analog grouping. Collision group. Instrument rack grouping. Chain list data grid. Collision data item selected. Data item. Chain solo checkbox not checked.
Shift tab.
Chain activator check. Chain pan slider. Chain volume sliders. Previous. Auto select checkbox not checked.
Shift tab again.
Show slash hide. Show slash hide. Show slash hide. Show slash hide macro. Save pre. Hot dash swap pre. Instrument rack grouping.
Right, so when it says instrument rack grouping, let's press the right click.
Cut control. Copy. Rename. Edit. Delete. Group control. Group to drop. Fold dash. Show pre. Copy Mac. Save as default. Cut control. Copy. Rename control. Edit info. Delete. Group control plus G. Group to drum rack. Fold dash. Show preset name. Copy max for. Save as default. Cut control plus. Device
Okay, so it's
detail
not there.
grouping.
Let's,
Instrument rack grouping. Device activator checkbox checked.
tab forward.
Instrument rack grouping. Hot dash swap. Save preset. Show slash hide macro controls checkbox. Show slash auto select checkbox not checked.
Tab where it says nothing. Tab one more time. Okay, don't want to tab from there, so
Chain
shift
list
tab.
data grid. Chain activator check. Chain pans. Chain volume slider 0.0 des. Previous.
Right, let's right click where it says previous.
Cut control. Copy. Delete. Duplicate. Rename. Edit in. Show names. Create chain.
There it is. So where it says previous, right click there and you can get create chain.
Device detail grouping. Instrument rack grouping. Chain list data grid. Chain data item selected. Data item row 3.
This
Chain
is
volume
nav row
slider
3.
0.0 decibels. Chain pan slide. Chain activator check. Chain solo check. Hot dash swap presets button.
We'll click
Browser
on that.
grouping. Instrument. CV CV. Drift. DS clang data. Drift data item selected collapse.
Let's add a drift. And we'll switch to session.
Session grouping. D F F O F F G F F K K.
There we go. So it's a little fiddly, but you can get there.